Hey everyone, welcome to Non-Casual Poly. I'm Daru. I want to talk about expectations, feelings of disappointment, having hope, and then feelings of futility. When it comes to relationships, I think these emotions aren't particularly unique. I think a lot of people go through them, and especially for myself, disappointment can be a big one. Especially if you're someone who really values deep connections and connections that have a certain kind of emotional depth to it. One where, communication is valued, one where problems are hashed out, one where closeness is actually valued. These kinds of things, they don't sound revolutionary, because if you actually have a conversation with someone and say, hey, do you want to have, close connections? Everyone would just say yes, but you might end up fooling yourself into believing that yes is the same yes that you might have. Because the fact of the matter is, not everyone wants what you want. And that can be initially disappointing. I think especially for people who really value, close connections, growing up can be a bit of a rough one. Because when you're younger, you have a bit more hope. You believe that on some level that everyone is kind of like you, kind of like operating on the same system. Maybe not, like you still value your individuality, don't get me wrong, but you're naive really to, just how different people can be and just how different their views on life can be. And it's only once you get hit by a real experience of difference, of like maybe having a really close friend and watching them just not be as close as you thought they were, or getting into a relationship and having an idea of what being in a relationship means to you, and then noticing that being in a relationship means something completely different to someone else, that word doesn't hold the same meaning, that they're experiencing life through a completely different lens, and that ultimately you weren't compatible with that person. But when you're younger, you might maybe think there's something wrong with you for having these expectations. You might end up believing that you're asking for too much, that the world, that you're incompatible with the world or something like that. I think these feelings are very very normal if you're someone who really truly values some level of emotional intimacy, and you feel like it's almost your lifeblood. Like when you're watching a TV show or you're experiencing art or something like that, your favorite things are the characters, the emotional relationship between the characters. You can kind of get lost in those things. That those kinds of experiences aren't arbitrary. I know this for a fact because I've talked to people and I asked them, what are they watching TV shows and stories for? And some people will just say the plot. Some people will say, the action, this, that. But, and here's the thing. A lot of people will say things like the characters and stuff. But then, based on what they watch, you can kind of tell, how much do they actually value the depth between the characters. Anyway, I'm just using art and media as an example. But really what I'm trying to get at is there is just a vast variety in the type of people that exist, and with that variety comes, the positive of that is variety itself. You don't necessarily want everyone to be the same, because then life would be kind of dull, kind of boring, kind of samey. And if you really looked into that and felt what that could be like, it would probably suck, let's be honest. But this difference also comes with a lot of pain, especially if you have expectations for your desires, and these desires, when they come into the realm of relationships, it's a lot more difficult, because each person does have a unique aspect to them, and each person is, trying to ultimately get what they want out of life. But not everyone knows how to articulate what that is, and everyone's using the same words for just about everything. Someone who, maybe leans more anxious will use the word love. And someone who leans more avoidant will use the word love. And someone who leans more secure will use the word love. And someone who leans more disorganized will use the word love. And the person next to you will use the word love, and that will mean very different things to different people, because at the end of the day, we're using language to kind of just pass out our experience. And when we feel like there's something, just a little bit similar, we might be like, yeah, I guess we all understand what love is. I mean, that's obviously not true. Everyone's having their own definition of what they think relationships are, what love is, what connection is, what emotional intimacy is. And people have, self-images about the kind of person they are, and then they engage with different kinds of people, and they might get kind of like a stark contrast showcasing them that maybe they're not the person they thought they were. When they experience the real thing, So, all in all, I guess what I wanted to emphasize is difference, has a way of fighting with one's own expectations, fighting with one's own desire. And it can really, when you get hit with that a lot, it can really make you, not hope, feel like maybe it's impossible to get the kind of friendships you want, or the kind of relationships you want, or the kind of connections that you want. And, I'm not gonna, sit here and say like, turn that smile upside down, because sometimes it's just too hard. Sometimes that feeling, especially if you're someone who really values that as something they want in their life, sometimes it is just too hard to put a smile on your face. And instead, like, maybe there's some other solution. Like partly for me, like when I do feel into this disappointment, one thing I do is actually make these videos. One thing I do is actually sketch. I have different, I guess I call them coping mechanisms to kind of get through it all. But, at the end of the day, self-care is important. But I guess more than anything, I just want to give voice to that disappointment. And just emphasize that the disappointment is legitimate. It's not just some silly disappointment. It's that disappointment, and maybe expecting that you're asking for too much, or those kinds of things. They're not just shadow expressions of your life. They are actually logical responses to the life experiences that you've had. Not saying you should stay in that place, but they are still logical. And you're not crazy for believing that. But that's why it takes like a leap of faith, I guess, to hope for something better, to change the methods in which you try to find people, to ultimately get what you want, to ultimately feel satisfied by the connections in your life. You look within and see what you actually want, and then see if it's actually possible, or to dare to ask from the world, or to demand from the world that it is possible, really. And to be okay with it never working out simultaneously. It seems like that dance is what's required to some extent. A willingness to hold expectation whilst also being okay with the expectation not working, but simultaneously, putting in the work and the actions to make that expectation a reality, and taking feedback. And I guess it's just a lot, and sometimes it can just be overwhelming. Sometimes trying to do all these things is sometimes you just need a break. Sometimes it's just not worth it on that day. But I do find myself always just trying again, and I guess that's why that healthcare, self-help, well, just self-care, like taking care of yourself is important, Like I said, like this video is me essentially taking care of myself, to just get through the process, to eventually find the connection that I want, to feel content with like what I have. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys, resonated or anything like that. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, take care.